Welcome to the Brain Body Fit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jerome Rerucha, and today we have Dr. Larry Miller, who is a currently retired, very accomplished dentist, but we are not going to be talking dentistry today. We are going to be talking world-class bench pressing. And I'm going to let Dr. Larry do his accolades, but he is called Dr. Bench Press for a reason. So thanks for being here, Dr. Larry. And let's just start you kind of giving your own introduction here, and then we're going to hit the ground running.
Okay, well, I'm one of six kids. I'm second of six kids. First four were boys, next two were girls. And I had an older brother who would kind of beat up on me on a somewhat regular basis. So I decided to start lifting weights my dad had in the bedroom. After cracking a window, we decided to move it into the basement. And so that's how I began my weightlifting career. After graduating dental school in 1980, I decided to start competing with the American Drug-Free Powerlifting Association, and which turned into the USA Powerlifting Association. So that's how I got to where I am now by watching, talking, looking, listening. Ohio was known for as a powerlifting state. Black's Health World in Cleveland had the strongest team in the world, and then followed by Westside Barbell out of Columbus took that spot. And so I had a lot of good mentors for me to work with. Black's Health World was John Black. He gave me my first bench press lesson. And then later on, Louis Simmons out of Westside Barbell was a good friend of mine. Met him in, I think, 1981. And we oftentimes communicated back and forth about all kinds of things. So I learned a lot from Louis. And I also, Louis had put an article in years ago, I'm trying to still locate it, about rubber bands. And I became a big fan of utilizing rubber bands in fitness. So much so that by my dental office, I opened a rubber band studio. It was also like a personal training studio, but the rubber bands were really interesting. We used split it up 20 minutes of stretching, 20 minutes of cardio, and 20 minutes of strength training. So we'll get into the rubber bands later because I think that's the key to safe and effective powerlifting, power training.
Yeah, we are. We're going to get into that in real detail. So we want this to be a phenomenal class. The goal of this is to literally have this the best documentary of what Dr. Miller has in his head of all the years of experience. And what he did was historical still to this day. It is a fascinating accomplishment that he did. I'm going to start off just by playing a video. So those of you at home, you want to increase your bench press, we've got Mr. World Class here. And even dating back to when this was, it still holds relevance today.
So watch my foot position. That competition, I did three triple body weight benches. I was in the 165-pound class. I started with 501, 519, 529. Actually, I tried 534 after that. You were allowed fourth attempts for world records. Actually, the 529 was a world record. We were short an international referee, so I didn't get credit for it at that time. But since then, I have accomplished world records that still hold to this date with people like Ed Cohn, Mike Bridges, some of the Gene Bell all-time best powerlifters of all time.
Yeah, and with that, so when people see a video like that, they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm going to go start bench pressing, even use some of the similar techniques, like maybe put my arms out all wide. But there's a million steps in between. So, elite lifters that are already competing at a high state level, of course, the ones at nationals, you get to internationals, worlds, everybody realizes that. But everybody who's already an elite power lifter, especially if they want to focus on bench press, is going to want to listen to this interview because Dr. Larry has so many things to offer and teach, and he is the world authority, not by my decision, but the people who are still leading strength, sports, and coaching and mentoring people, and they own the big companies out there. They would still consider Larry the world authority on eccentric overload. And so that's going to be a lot of our focus when we get into this, of how to use the bands properly, and not just typical band use, but really working into that eccentric overload, which is a very unique concept, and it can be applied to other lifts. We're going to primarily be talking about the bench press, but obviously what you're going to learn can carry over even to accessory exercises and other lifts such as squatting and those aspects. So from here, let's go back. If you want to even hit some of you did a good job on the history parts already. So I guess we're just going to jump right into going into the next slide here. Start demoing current time, and you explained some of the conventional bench methods. So we're going to start here, play this video, and then pause and let you describe. Why don't you walk us through there, kind of showing some of the things for people who aren't using bands already. This is what would be considered in today's day and age very conventional band use. But go ahead, Larry.
Okay, so this is, according to what Louis Simmons called it, dynamic training. So it's moving weights quickly. There was a gentleman, Fred Hatfield, passed away a while back. Dr. Squat was his nickname. And Fred would say, you never move a weight slowly. He said, the sport's called powerlifting. Power is based on speed. So obviously this is not the weight or the band tension that I used to use 20, 30 years ago, but I'm 71, so you guys got to give me a little bit of a break here. So the theory behind this is that, again, without wanting to move a weight without ever wanting to move a weight slowly, you have to train for power. It's especially important for seniors. I didn't realize it, but when a senior falls, they've got to react quickly. And I've never been to a gym whereby I've seen a senior train quickly with weights. Now, and partially because it's not safe. When you add rubber bands, it becomes very safe. So what we used to do, and I won't go into detail, but I used to have a Muscle Lab power machine. I must have got it 20, 30 years ago. And so the only problem with a lot of what I'm going to tell you is with the rubber bands, it's difficult to know how much tension is on there because it's variable resistance. So at one point, it might be giving you 30 pounds of resistance. At another point, it's 50 pounds, etc. So when you're calculating power, you need to know what the resistance is. So it's basically a guesstimate, but as long as it's consistent, if you're using an orange band and say, well, that's worth 30 pounds versus a black Monster Mini band and say that's worth 70 pounds, you can plug it into the equation. But again, I'm currently working, trying to find some companies that can help me develop a system or an app to calculate power. But what we used to do, again, we gave it a number, and then we would calculate the force. Louis had recommended 8 sets of 3 repetitions. And the problem with that is I found that the first and the third were the slowest. So you only got one quick repetition. So, since Louis used to say 50% of your weight is what you should use for speed. So again, you calculate whatever band you're using and the weight on the bar. And you plug that into the formula, and hopefully it was around 50%. That's where we started. Then what we would do, let's say I did 800 watts of power with 225 pounds and a black band. Well, if I jumped up to 230 and my power outage went down, then I didn't want to use that extra weight. I went back down to 225 instead of 230. So it's always, you have to recheck your power on a regular basis. But if you're a strength athlete, I think it's an important tool. They've got a lot of companies that measure power now. You can look it up and see what works best for you. So, so the goal was to always increase your power, but to maximize the power, there's a force velocity curve, and somewhere in there you will max out on the power, and that's the important number you want. And because of the way the bands work, as the bar comes down, the bands deload. So you can use a quick eccentric, which will give you a fast concentric. So your stretch reflex will be a stronger contraction, and your velocity will be really, really quick because you can actually, as you saw me moving it very quickly, instead of the pausing on the chest or any of that stuff, this will generate more power. And again, the difference is with the bands, now as you're extending it to lockout, the bands slow you up because now you're stretching the bands. So this is what you do for how to move a weight quickly and safely. Um, we'll talk a little bit later. I attach bands to as much equipment as I possibly can. I don't do what I used to do at my age now, but I've got them attached to my jammers. I've got them attached to my ab machine, my reverse hyper machine, my tricep machine. I used to have a leg press hack squat machine, but I had to give it to a friend because I didn't have any room for it. But I didn't use any weight with that. I used rubber bands. If you go to Kaiser, Keiser equipment, they've got a video where they show all these seniors moving weights really quickly. They understand the dynamic behind how seniors should be training. And that's one thing I want to bring to light. Dr. Jerome was talking about some of the things we'll talk about later on, but I am making a machine called the Band Tracks, which is a similar version to what you're seeing now for squatting. And boy, I squat up and down really quickly. And that's something seniors can do. And again, low tension at the bottom. So you get out of the hole really quickly, explosively, and that will incorporate your fast twitch muscle fiber, which is what seniors really want to do. Seniors will lose power more quickly than they will strength. I'm not saying don't train for strength, but in most sports, you want some sort of strength foundation, but you really want to train for power. And I recently asked the gentleman, Tom Barry from Westside Barbell, who's been running that for a couple of years, how he breaks strength training and power training up. And it sounds like he's about 50-50. So you have to devote a fair amount of time to this type of training. The only thing is some of the training with the bands is tough. So you don't want to do it every day or every other day, etc. You want to have spotters, you want to be safe, you want to be smart. Okay?
Which is one of the advantages of the piece of equipment that you're using right there. Just while you brought that up, I mean, there's so many great options out there right now, even training in a power rack with safety racks. This is a competition level bench rack, which also is used in competition squatting. It is IPF certified in all the top elite federations. But why don't you just mention, even to people, if they're interested, they want that question answered, where would you get something like you're using there?
Actually, a good friend of mine from Denmark, who I used to compete against, Eric Rasmussen, developed this many, many years ago. And there's levers. You can see them hanging down at a right angle. So you can move the rack height up and down real quickly and easily, even if the weights get pretty heavy on there. The safety mechanism on that is really nice and easy to use. And you see the bands attached to the angled bars. You see the bands attached to the angle floor there.
Stabilizers.
Yeah. So, and those have to be placed at the right spot too. You don't want the bands lined up with your neck, or your knees. You want it lined up where you're going to be bringing the bar down to your chest. So, so Eric, the original is oftentimes always the best. He's got rollers so you can slide it side to side. And it's a lot lighter than some of the other machines, weigh 500 pounds. I used to take this apart, put it in my car all by myself. So the ER squat bench combo rack is sold by a friend of mine, Pete Alaniz. He owns Titan Support Systems, Titan. Pete's a great guy. I think he's the only person, there's maybe one other selling it in the United States, but I think it's the best combo machine ever invented. Easy to use, not super heavy. Nowadays they're putting band pegs everywhere so you can attach bands. So we just have to kind of slide one side up and stick the bands underneath. And again, we measure so we across the chest. And again, it's just a great sturdy machine.
Yeah, a lot of great power racks out there. You made the notion with that they're so multidimensional, band pegs everywhere. Bench presses have bands, but if for those of you that want to compete, this type of equipment is mandatory or standard, I should say. It's standard
Right.
to use in competition of certain competitions. So if you want to take it serious, you train on the equipment, you're going to be competing in as well. Not a complete necessity, but it makes sense. I mean, you just get completely comfortable with what you're going to be using in competition, even though they don't let you use bands in competition. But this again, this is the whole part of when people just see really strong people and they compete in a certain thing. There is so much science, leverage, technology, prevention of injuries, prehab, clinical exercises besides just what they're getting tested on. So you did a great intro. Couple things. You had mentioned seniors moving the weight fast, and a really good point. You probably don't want to start there if you haven't been trading. Even if you're a silver sneakers person, there's a lot of value to that. My advice with it, if you want to start training rapidly, you got to get with a person that competes, at least a successful state level competitor. They're never going to let you get hurt. They themselves, every day in the gym, they're pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. They know how to prevent injuries best as possible, and they're not going to do that. You just get an average trainer or somebody who's never competed in a bench press. Not my advice. You're going to find competitive lifters in powerlifting everywhere. They're great teachers. They understand the mechanics, maybe not at the world-class level of Dr. Miller here, but you don't need that to start. They're going to get you the right place to start, even doing some conventional lifting, and then progress you into speed training when you are ready for it.
Right. Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier.
No, that's okay.
That,
That's why there's two of us.
two heads are better than one. Yeah, so they always recommend before power training, you have to be on a strength program. And Dr. Jerome is right that this is for an experienced lifter. So these are the bands under. We'll be seeing bands over later, and that's even for a more experienced lifter. But again, the secret with the bands is that, if you go on vacation and you want a gym, put a rubber band. And I can tell you from my experience with my rubber band facility that you can do some pretty crazy stuff and speed stuff from the get-go with the rubber bands. So you can have, oh gosh, I should have had a rubber band closer by. You can have a rubber band around your
You
back at
you can
each
go
arm,
ahead. Take a break.
and
Go
you
get
can
one,
go ahead
Larry.
and move the rubber band. Okay, let me grab one quick. So I think you cross it over. Uh, so you can move a rubber band really quickly. And there's, again, different strength rubber bands. So this will generate power. And again, you can get to pretty good tension. There are some people who sell these programs. Can't remember the guy's name, but he's done really well with just rubber bands and a simple handle. So rubber bands by themselves, any exercise you can do with weights, you can generally do with a rubber band. It's just a matter of finding the size, the correct tension, and then understanding how to use them. Sometimes if you're attached to something, if I had two, and you can tie two rubber bands together. So if I had this attached to something behind me, and I wanted more tension, instead of my back is limiting. But if I put it around a post or something, then if I wanted more tension, all I've got to do is step out. So let me kind of demonstrate, I guess, here. Let's see.
Yeah, that should be a good angle.
Sorry for the glare. So if I were doing this, now I've got a lot more tension. If I want more tension, I step closer to you. So again, um, I remember the first time I read about rubber bands in Powerlifting USA magazine, which, I waited for every month to come to my house. I wrote a lot of articles, a lot on bench press, a lot of interviews, and a lot of rubber band training. And I remember the first day Louis Simmons introduced rubber bands to the sport. And I called him up that night because everybody was always looking for the next best thing. And I said, Louis, I said, is this what I think it's going to do to powerlifting? And he said, yes, he will. He said, this will change the face of powerlifting and sports in general. And I hate to make a comment like this, or maybe I don't hate to make a comment, but I think the people who understand the bands, the value of the bands, are probably way ahead of the rest of the field. When you see LeBron using bands, when you see Rob Gronkowski, um, or let me see who, well,
Tom
Rob,
Brady,
the belt
you
squat
see
machine,
a lot of his training speed snappy.
right? Right. So there are a lot of professional athletes, and when I see a professional athlete using a lot in tennis, I always say that person has a good strength and conditioning coach because they understand the value of the bands. The bands can do things that nothing else can mimic, and we'll get into that later on too.
Previously, when we talked about band loading, even though a band is rated for a certain amount, and it is, the big companies that sell these, I mean, these people are constantly training top to level competitors, but we all have different arm length, bar loads. So would you agree that you could take minimum a luggage scale, even though I have some nice luggage scales as I travel a lot for seminars, but you could use a crane scale, you could use a fishing scale, and basically you're looking at your arm length travel, even though the resistance changes in between when you're at least looking at the top lockout, you get a very accurate
Right.
number of what is the band tension at the top. Obviously, you could even have somebody help you. What's the band tension when it's at your chest? You could even do one mid-level point. I mean, we don't need to sweat the super small details at this level, but really accurate to get the number of what's your arm travel and how to measure that band tension specific for you.
Yeah, I on my band tracks machine for squatting, and actually, Dr. Jerome will show you a videotape of the original one and its value. But oh God, I lost my train of thought here. But
Well, we are going to get into the band tracks. We didn't mention that in the beginning of this, really setting the stage
oh,
with pyramiding, for
right,
instance, into the education, the information, some of the basic integrations, and
mhm.
even going back to the numbers that you hit and starting with that. So many great things today. I mean, training has evolved. This is something that hasn't gotten lost in the weeds, but yet because so much phenomenal things get piled on it, this is something that is timeless, and your lifts and totals still are timeless. And even though you're still ranked as one of the all-time greats, they're still comparing your totals to people current day that are using a lot better equipment. Like there is no correlation between the bench shirts when you were competing in that specific list compared to the advantages they possess today. Not taking anything away from modern lifters, but really putting credit where credit's due of what Larry achieved in his 40s. And how old, like, was that at age 41 you did that specific lift, lifetime drug free?
That was actually 48.
Yeah. Okay. I knew you hit some huge numbers at 48. I didn't know where that was. So I wanted to make a point of that too. So again, lifetime drug free, age 48, and it is the method to the madness. It's not like Larry's some genetic freak and he didn't work for this. He just showed up one day and is like, oh, you got a big bench press. It's like, you know, he was driven by it, but the amount of thought and detail that goes into this, and that's why with the whole brain body fit system, I always tell people the advantage is having a competitive strength and fitness background is a superpower for you as a clinician. The amount of three-dimensional thinking, the amount of prevention, the amount of details that you learn is just a strength at fitness athlete is unparamounted if you want to maximize, disprove gravity, go past what your body's physically capable of doing. You got to mentally train the body to be strong and not get injured. There is no book you will ever read. There's no seminar you're ever going to take. Competing and pushing yourself past what you could ever do, meeting the great people in whatever sport you choose, you will learn so much. And if you are a clinician, you will be a better clinician without a doubt, whether it's nutrition, structure, soft tissue, full outcomes, including helping people get groceries pain-free or incurable people, whether it's structural pain, visceral diseases. put that clinical application to use integrated with it is paramount. So I'm going to play this one more time just to see, with all the great information that you provided, if there's anything you want to add to it before we go to the next level. Oops, or not.
Nope.
Even breathing, leg drive, grip. Obviously, grip, people are going to want to find their magic leverage. Obviously, you worked hard on yours and other people found out. I mean, some people can do better gripping a little narrower, but hey, once you get under a superior coach like you never know. Sometimes you think that's not optimum for you. The superior coach will help you fix things that you didn't realize. Anything you want to add to that, Larry, before we go?
Well, it depends. Do you want to do some of the bench press technique now, or
I guess we could stick to the bands.
okay?
This isn't necessarily a one and done podcast either. Like, there's so many details we could teach on this. So, really kind of want to really drive home the importance of band, the different ways of using bands, including eccentric overload. And then ultimately we're working our way into the band tracks, which, just like rubber bands, totally transformed rehab, not just powerlifting. I mean, would you see how bands are used in all forms of athletic training? It was a moment in history of working out that still makes a huge impact today. And what Larry has worked on with the band tracks coming up, it's going to do the same thing for sport performance as well as clinical exercise and rehab when we get to that point at towards more the end of the podcast. So you want to explain before I play the video?
Sure. You know, I've been calling this eccentric overload, but in the old days we called it a negative. um, and This is not set up ideally for me. The weight's too light, the bands are too heavy, they're probably positioned a little bit high. So the goal is, let's say, if what do I have on there? 185 pounds. 45.
And not to interrupt you, but because you kind of made a comment of a negative, I mean, even though you're truly pulling this down, so it's really a reciprocal to a bench. Like, this is going to integrate your back muscles, which are super important. Novice lifters, they think bench is a chest exercise, that it's like your posterior chain is probably always stronger than your anterior chain, especially bringing down what the posterior chain carries the weight bringing down, and the neuromechanics to do that. So the bands kind of exaggerate that. And then obviously, as you're going to explain, when you push up, the bands take weight off of your chest, but then it's significantly overloaded in your lockout progressively and smooth, which is where that eccentric overload really kicks in and defines accurately.
Right. I had another video of us doing 550-pound overloads, which would have probably been better, but I wanted to try and make it a little bit more current. So again, you have to find, and again, this is for an experienced lifter, the top of the purple bands, again, should align with where the bar is going to come down your chest. It should also be at a level whereby when you've got your arms at lockout, there's just you're doing all the work and the bands are not engaged at the top. So again, if my max was 529 and I'm doing 550 pounds at the top, that's eccentric overload for me, and the bands are not engaged. So I'm holding that 550 pounds. As it comes down and you engage the bands, um, then it's lighter, obviously, at your chest, 300 pounds, 315 pounds. Again, just a matter of what type of band you use. We always double the bands over, is the best way to do it if possible. But in this case, I think because there's such a big separation between where they're hanging from and the weights, I probably just singled them out. Plus, I didn't want to hurt myself. So, anyways, so you bring it down and you can bring it up quickly. So you can actually incorporate the overload for a little bit, and then you can still bring it off your chest quickly. Remember, because if again, I've got 550 pounds and my max is 530, I'm not going to be able to lock out 550. It's just too much weight for me. So by incorporating a little bit of power movement to the movement, again, you get that momentum and you lock out the 550. So you actually get the overload, at the beginning and at the end. Okay. And then again, if you want more overload throughout the lift, then you change the tension on the bands. Instead of the light bands there, maybe use the Monster Mini bands, etc. So,
All right, I'm going to play the video. Now, you pretty much said a great review prior to it, but for the listeners that maybe have seen this for the first time, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to it. Um, they can go back and rewind it, listen to all the great details you provided before too. But is there anything you saw there that you want to add to?
no, I think again, it's just finding the right bands. You always want to start with a heavier band. And then as you get stronger, you gradually go to a lighter band because then you're doing more of the work and the band's doing less of the work. So it's a gradual thing. And again, this is when you get it, when I'm doing 550, when I was doing 550 pounds, that was a very taxing weight for your body. So you do need recovery time for that. So again, on this, I don't go over. um, I don't go over like 155 pounds. I usually do it for 30 reps. So this was a little bit more than what I normally do, but it's still not a heavy weight. So you have to kind of just assume that, okay, if I had a heavier weight on there, I'd want larger bands but the movement is still the same. And again, depending on how high the bands are set up, you can have that overload up until you bring the bar down 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches. So that's all under your control. If you have more problem at the bottom, then you need just some band tension at the bottom. You don't want a whole lot of band tension at the bottom. So anyway, so you have to understand the force curve and how to utilize the bands. Again, when I first learned about the bands, I was up that entire night thinking of how I'm going to incorporate them. We got together as a group. We started one way, then we changed up. So, like anything else, it evolved. It's a tool that we learned how to incorporate into our programs.
Now, have you ever stacked bands to where you would be using a light band and a micro mini together to where it really brings that band tension gradually down, but because the micro mini is going to completely be obsolete a lot faster than the light band, it would almost train a different arc of the strength cycle somewhat. I mean, obviously, just using a single band and doing it the way you are is great, but I just didn't know if
Well, for the speed work, yes, that's a good way to do it. If you're working with a Monster Mini Band and you find, okay, I want to increase the resistance, because again, the force velocity curve, the more resistance, the slower you're going to be. So when you add a band, it's going to slow you up a little bit. But again, it's got to be placed in that formula. Am I going to produce more power? In a situation like this, yes, you might have to add a couple bands. It depends if you double them up, the big blue bands, the strong bands, the monster bands. So yeah, it's just a matter of what exercise you're doing. But for a real heavy exercise like this, adding a micro band is going to be negligible.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just I would rather use the placement of the bands and probably do more with the heavy bands on
All right.
this.
Now, this again, we put this. This is just a still shot. You know, now people kind of seeing technique and even what you're demonstrating there, the aggressiveness of your leg stance and leg drive. I don't know if you want to comment on that when we were kind of discussing ahead of time and we put this in.
Well, yeah, I somebody told me a long time ago, one of my competitors, to do decline bench press. And I was really amazed when my group, and we used to lift at the local gym, maybe 15 of us. So we had a good group of people. Um, and when we started doing decline bench press, I don't do incline bench press. I think it's tough on the shoulder and a waste of time. I think the decline, and again, this was a world-class lifter who told me this, made more sense. And the reason being is we found that when we did decline bench presses, we could handle more weight. And when you're on a decline bench, you can't use your legs. So I'm thinking, how can I use more weight and I'm not even using my leg drive. Well, it's because the way the decline bench is made, it shortens the distance the bar travels. So if you're a competitive bencher, obviously that's why you want a wider grip because you shorten the distance the bar travels. The Japanese, and I'll show you what they used to do. They used to incorporate pool noodles to increase their arch. So I used to have an arch, but then you can't do an arch and have a decline bench press. So what we were doing again, we were able to handle more weight on the decline than the flat bench. So what I did is I thought, why don't I try and make my regular bench look like a decline bench press? So to some degree, you can kind of get the idea that my body's kind of trying to angle down and I'm really digging my shoulders into the bench. So I mimic a decline bench press when I'm bench pressing. Now, as far as the decline bench press goes, you need two good spotters, a lift-off person and two good spotters, because it is a heavy weight. And we did that, as an alternative to heavy benches. We would rotate things out. I think Louis called that the conjugate method, changing, exercises every couple of weeks so your bodies can adjust to new exercises and grow. But so you want to bring the bar down low, which is what I'm doing. You want your arms angled at about 45 degrees. The first bench lesson I got was from John Black, and I was benching out like this. And John did this. He said, I put my arm on his chest and he was going like this. And he says, "You feel anything?" And I said, "No." And then he did this. He brought his arms in. I said, "Okay, now your pec's engaged." So that was the first lesson I got. Your arms have to be angled. If you're out like this, say goodbye to your shoulders. And plus, again, you'll bring the bar lower. You engage the lats better, the triceps better. You just don't want a bench press with your elbows out. So they've got to be in. The bar should be over your arm. You don't want your wrists back here and the bar not centered over the arm. So you want the bone supporting that position of it. Again, how do you know if you're using leg drive is another important thing. When I wrote my first article on it, I got calls from South Africa, Europe, around the world. They wanted to know how do you do this? And it's hard to explain on the phone, but sometimes we'd lift on in fact, I had special shoes made. These are my
Here's a
bench.
little history lesson back in the day.
This is a scuba boot attached to a wrestling shoe. And one time when I was at Westside Barbell, Louis Simmons asked me, he said, "Larry, you read my articles?" And I said, "Sure, I do." I said, "Do you read my articles?" He says, "You want to see my bench press shoes?" So Louis would do whatever it took to maximize things. And again, in the old days, you didn't have carpet, so your feet would slip. First international meet I was at was in Germany, and they had a really terrible platform. I was slipping all over the place. It cost me, I think I was the first USA lifter to win an IPF medal for the USA powerlifting. And I got a bronze, but had I had better footing, so I even went to a shoe store there to try and find something, but I couldn't find anything at that point in time. So I would push so hard. And again, when we were in training, if we didn't have carpet, somebody would block my feet and I would just about knock them over. That's how hard I was pushing against their feet. The other thing I realized is I would always bench press in a tank top, even in the middle of winter, because when I'm pushing with my legs and I'm driving my shoulders back, I would move farther and farther back on the bench. So if I started here, if my head was here, it ended up here. So that's how hard I was pushing with my feet to engage my legs to the maximum. I never met anybody, I believe, that used their legs as much as I did. So,
You
so
can
you
tell, even though you're known as a bench presser, but you don't have chicken legs. You're not a guy riding an ostrich over there. So you
well,
did some.
thank, thank you. Well, my best squat was 524. I think I was the only one whose bench was better than their squat. So when I did compete in all three lifts, and I would be in last place after the squat. I would be in first or second place after the bench press, and then last place after the deadlift. Although I did finish third one time at nationals. So yeah, so I wasn't known for my squatting, but I did
Well,
have
that's
to.
still impressive that those are still some legit lifts. I mean, most people they just do the bench press portion of the meet to hit numbers like you did, and for you still be doing full meets and those are still legit numbers. I mean, not comparable to the bench, but I mean, most
Right,
people who want to hit bench numbers like that, I mean, that's all they do in
right,
competition.
right.
All right, so here we go. Here's going to be a future secret weapon. This is patented. This is still a prototype. Um, Take us through this. Obviously, this is going to have a lot of advantages to elite athletics. I don't know if you want to start there or if you want to start with the clinical portion and even leading into the benefits with back pain, spinal issues. You go with whatever you want to start with.
Okay, well, as I said, I my best squat was 524, but I hated squatting. And Louis Simmons invented a belt squat machine, and Dr. Jerome's got a video of the original one. I took a couple friends down there to train with Louis. So this is a belt squat machine. It may not look like one, but it is. For all those that don't know what a belt squat machine, you should, because I think it is the most important exercise machine ever invented. And I would argue till I'm dead that there's not a better machine than this. Your two most important muscle groups are your glutes, or your two largest ones are your glutes and your quadriceps. And they're the reason they're the largest. You use that for getting up, for walking, for running, etc., for doing your cardio. So Louis had fractured his back in 1975. So he wanted to continue squatting. So he developed the belt squat is basically a belt goes around your waist, attaches to a pulley and cable system on the platform, which in turn attaches to a weight carriage, and you can add bands to it. So instead of bands, on mine, I have a weight carriage, instead of weights, I have the band carriage. I've also got a motor at the top. That orange thing above the bands is a fish scale, so I can measure the tension that the bands do. So the motor pulls the bands up, and that pulls down on your belt. Now, that's an 1,100-pound motor. Now, that's not what I'm going to be marketing. That's the only one they had available. They didn't have their 550-pound motor constructed yet, but I'm going to have a 550-pound motor. So this is going to isolate your legs better than a typical barbell squat. The other advantage to this, because it's rubber bands, again, remember that when you stretch them, it makes it tougher, and when you de-stretch them, it lessens the tension. So again, the thing you can do on this, and I think Dr. Jerome has the video of me moving up and down really quickly with the squats. Again, that's training for power. And again, we talked about how important power is. I've got three-dimensional handles on this. So you can hold them, move up and down really quickly and safely. When you're at the bottom, there's not a lot of tension. At the top, you can exceed your max. And that's really, really important, because that's what a lot of these flywheel companies claim and pneumatic systems claim, that you can move up because, again, the variable resistance of the flywheels, you can actually lock out a heavier weight than your max. So when you're at the top, you've got a super maximal weight. So that's what they call eccentric overload. Again, we've got a video showing on mine. You can stand erect, and then I can load the bands to way, way, way above. It's not based on my power. It's based on my motor. So if my max is 250 pounds, I can load that motor to 300. If my max is 250 and I load the motor to 350, that is a significant overload. That is a real overload. And I just tried it out with deadlifts, and you can do the same thing with deadlifts. So I think this is going to change the future of how we uh, get massive hypertrophy in muscles, how we get stronger tendons and ligaments because of the overload, how we incorporate more fast twitch and slow twitch muscles. There's a lot of research on eccentric overload. The problem is nobody's been able to do it in a real system. And because of the motor and because of the bands, it's easy to do. So I think there are going to be a lot of studies. I'm going to be working with Spire Academy in Geneva, Ohio. They're going to have a research center. I'm sure they'll do some things for vertical jump. If you've ever done rubber band jump squats, it is really tough, and it's great for vertical jump. Louis said that his belt squat machine or athletic training platform, as he referred to it, was the best machine for vertical jump. But Louis didn't have bands back then. When you use bands and that resistance, your body learns how they have to try and outrun the resistance, those bands. So if you move slow, those bands are going to drive you back down. You have to, forces you to move quickly to get that power. So that's the real, the bands. And again, they're safe. Now, if you say, well, I'm a power lifter, if I have zero tension at the bottom, that's not going to help me. Well, again, this is a prototype. We're going to have attachments for short bands. So the short bands will give you more tension out of the bottom. I'm not sure how much tension. I'm not selling this for power lifters per se, although I think every power lifter would benefit from it. If not for nothing else, the eccentric overload plus a dynamic training, the speed training, getting those stretch reflex contractions much stronger. I think it's invaluable for that. But this is for people, the platform there folds up. This is for people, hopefully, I still don't know what the price is going to be, that they can put in their house, that we can see in therapy centers, senior centers. This can strengthen your hips, your back, and your legs better than any machine on the market. And we'll see that later in the video with Louis' original belt squat machine. And this will be able to incorporate all Louis' ideas with the next version.
Yeah, and me being a chiropractor, even though a little bit of uniqueness, definitely having the strength and conditioning background and hanging out with so many of the elite people learning over the years. But as you know, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, how safe this is, the progressions that are available for people with really degenerated backs. I mean, severe back injuries that even people, think they've tried everything, whether they had surgery and they think it's a failed surgery. Physical capacity is so important to safely activate the body, not just do passive decompression, which has its place, not just standard rehab, which has its place, but when you can put decompression, active decompression, and then you put the uniqueness of the bands into this machine is going to absolutely what bands did for elite training back in the day. This machine, when used properly by people that understand and are trained properly, it is going to transform the opportunities for people with severe spinal degeneration who have tried everything. Either they're trying to avoid surgery or they had surgery. And you can do this incredibly safely and progressive.
And the picture to the left, one of my friends, Gus, you see the belt around his waist and attached to the cable and the pulley in that gray box. And what's going on basically is, so all the forces, like my belt attaches underneath the groin. So the forces are being pulled perfectly vertical through the center of his body. When you do a deadlift, that bar's in front of you. That's tough on the back when you've got to lean forward a little bit. Everybody tries to stay straight, but the bar's in front of you. With this, everything's directly underneath you. And what they have found, the studies have been out for years and years and years. Inversion tables, I'm sorry to tell you people this, I had one. Inversion tables, decompression tables have not clinically been proven to help lower back pain. What they found was traction with movement, functional movement. Put yourself in a real lifestyle position, walking, running, whatever. This is traction with movement. You can march in place. You can do some quarter squats. You can do some hip thrusts. So your traction, anytime you're on this machine doing anything with the belt around your waist, it provides traction. And again, that's an 1,100-pound motor. I don't know anybody wants traction to their back with 1,100 pounds. But again, these are some mean forces. You can replicate decompression tables on this. They say, well, the good ones, they're on for 30 seconds and they're off for 15 seconds or whatever, so you get better hydration and gel moving around or whatever they claim. Well, you can do that on this. You just take the remote control, you traction for 30 seconds, then you can go off for 15 seconds, maybe do some movements, some bending exercises to get the hydraulics going back there in the disc. So This is just, and it's vertical. I've had terrible back pain. That's why I came out of retirement. I couldn't walk my dog. I had just bought him. It's a rare breed, a Dogo Argentino. Jerome saw a picture of him earlier.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
I was going to get rid of him. And I remember Louis telling me I have a Rhino belt squat machine in my basement too. He said, march in place. And I did one time, and my sciatica was gone. And I've helped maybe 30 people with back problems and been very effective because of the functional movement. You can't move when you're on a decompression table. You can't move when you're upside down. The two newest models are the VertiTrack, made from out of Israel, and the ProTech FMT, out of Japan, and they involve a lot of movement, but not as good as what I can do. And their studies were really, really strong in relating to alleviating back pain and alleviating it very quickly. So I think again, the key, aquatic therapy has always been successful for back issues because it decompresses the spine. So I think traction in the right place, and this is around, the belt fits around your lumbar area. You are pulling directly on that section. When you get into these old decompression tables, they're pulling on your entire spine. Well, 90% of the problems, I guess you would know more than I do, I think are related to lower back pain in the lumbar area. So to have that belt pulling on the lumbar spine, I think is a huge, huge plus.
Yeah, and you've taken all that into consideration. So, a lot of the concepts that you're talking about, I mean, that's just the strength and fitness world. I mean, it's putting strength through range of motion, being joint friendly. Obviously, times you're just using high compressive forces, but obviously, it's all about regeneration, recovery, training smarter, working a vast array of dynamics and tensions. Um, but sadly, I'm a clinician, and there's way too much what I call passive rehab. I am all for what I call the passive decompression tables, and I think they're great. I think if you want one, you should have one and keep using it. But it is an introduction, to say the least. And if I had to choose one or the other, which you don't have to, carry both. But this is a total game changer. I'm fully aware of those things. I've read the science, the research. I'm involved very heavily in both professions, strength and fitness, as well as the clinical world. And, of course, the clinicians that only practice in the clinical world, they don't have any experience in the other. I mean, they'll lay down in front of a train based upon what their experience and thoughts are. It's like that. It's great. I'm not saying that's not your experience, but there's a whole different world out there and a whole different world of success. And so I saw one day when I was out at Westside Barbell, and Louis was always very proactive with chiropractors in the area, and number of his guys that would train at the gym would also work in chiropractic offices doing rehab for the chiropractors. There was a pretty substantial chiropractic practice, and oddly enough, it was an upper cervical practice primarily, but they had an incredible gym that really had a lot of the West Side equipment that they were using for rehab. It wasn't a workout place. And they had like 4 of Louis' belt squats in there. So this was 20 years ago, maybe 23 years ago or so. And that's the first time I saw, and it was actually in a chiropractor office where they were taking people with low back pain and they were having them march in place with the belt squat. So I never forgot that, thought it was fascinating. That's where I met Marty Mitchell. And so we've known each other throughout that whole time. So for over 20 years, Marty and I have been talking about that concept of active decompression. Everything we do, holy cow, the amount of libraries of ideas Marty and I have talked about over the decades. And this was always on our mind. And we have way too many ideas, not enough focus. But this was always in the top 10, is something we really, really wanted to do. So then when we met you, it was like, oh my gosh, we can scratch that off the list because Larry is so far ahead of us and he is doing exactly what we were talking about doing in the next level that could be done from a rehab, a clinical performance standpoint, how we refer to that at Brain Body Fit. The clinical performance application, and you are doing it. So the belt is patented, and even with a regular belt squat belt, they serve their purpose. I mean, without a doubt, they're great. Not saying to get rid of those. And even on a clinical side, they would use thinner ones that would have a unique benefit to help decompress the back on a typical belt squat machine. But like you've put, just like every super elite powerlifter, you focus on the millimeters of millimeters to get the macro. And how you've designed this belt through what you already talked about, you did an A+ job. This is going to be amazing for clinicians who are going to be willing to listen, but also in the clinical strength and performance world that does a lot of proactive care on athletes. And a lot of their athletes aren't going to chiropractors, and they help those people in-house by doing this and other things that they've proven over the years as well. We just want a good inner working two-way street between the professions. But this is a fantastic machine you've created. Now, is this the point where you maybe even want to talk about the belt a little bit and its uniqueness? You already did, of how the traction goes through it. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the ball placement that you made in it, or we can wait for that at a different time. We don't have to go into that detail. It's totally up to you.
Well, just really quickly, again, I wanted things centered underneath the center of the body. I wanted pure vertical traction. And so that had to connect underneath. And Louis had talked a lot about how quickly he could resolve pelvic tilt. And I thought, well, if you're going to resolve pelvic tilt, it'd probably be best to attach the belt to 4 points on your hip and pull down with forces that will kind of reset your hip, for back of letter terminology. Like, and I worked with some of the guys from my friends from Cleveland State, Dr. McGinty in their PT department and Dr. Watt in their exercise science department, because I didn't know all the characteristics. So actually, they're coming over Monday, or this coming Monday, and we're going to try and revise a few things. But it's again, the other thing I did is an interesting story. I've had a knot, as I said, I've had back problems all along. I can't tell you how many times after benching somebody's had to help me off the bench because my back froze up on me. EMS had to rescue me from my house once on the toilet because my back. I was once in the dental office and going to anesthetize a patient. I had the needle out and my back froze, so my partner had to come grab the needle out of my hand. So I understand back pain. Okay, that's the point. Um, so the uh, so for me to go ahead and be able to help people is kind of what drove me to come out of retirement. As I said, I fixed my sciatica in one quick treatment on my Rogue, belt squat machine. So the concept of the movement, the concept of the resistance of the bands pulling down, all comes together, I think, for just an awesome, belt squat machine. And with all my back pain, again, I had a knot on my lower right side. And whether I went to physical therapy, whether I went to massage, they'd always try and get rid of it, and nobody could ever get rid of it. So I got one belt, the Rogue Belt Squat belt, and they have a company, AbMat, that has a cover for it. So I put the cover over the belt, and so there was a little bit of spacing between the two. So I took a lacrosse ball and put it between the two. And it took me a couple tries putting the belt on, making sure that lacrosse ball was centered over that tight muscle. I don't remember how much tension I put on the machine. I think it was pretty good, like 100 pounds. I don't know that there's a massage therapist or a chiropractor or a physical therapist that can push down in that small of a area that a lacrosse ball can with 100 pounds of force. I woke up the next morning and my back was a little sore, but that knot in my back was gone. So I think there's going to be some applications for non-specific lower back pain in doing this. Plus, and again, we're jumping the gun, the VertiTrack back traction machine from Israel that I mentioned, they claim 3D back traction. I don't buy it based on its setup. So what I did though is while I'm tractioning with my belt downward, I put a rubber band around my back, attach it to the handles. So I'm also pushing inward. Now, I don't know what that's going to do. According to VertiTrack, that helps with bulging or herniated disc. I'm not sure. So we're going to do studies at Cleveland State as soon as I get the next model. Hopefully I'll be able to sell, and hopefully that'll be before a year's end. But so there's a lot of potential. It's not just what it offers now, but the potential and what the studies will show. So again, I came out of retirement because I thought I could help millions of people get them back to work, allow them to do the things they love to do, pain-free.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why we always want to bring some of these cutting edge things, even on the show too, to tell people even before they're aware and introduce the origin stories, the people behind them. It's not just a machine. There's always a detailed story behind it, a tremendous amount of thought and use and success with this before it will ever get out to the general public. So here we go. We're going to start playing. This is you going to be demoing this again. One thing, that I noticed, because this has been in the back of my mind for so long, and I've tried to make makeshift models with my own belt squat here, and always knowing there needed to be a modification. Lifters are always tweaking in the gym, trying to do these things. So one of the first things I noticed too was your thick belt, where I was trying to go with a little thinner belts, which we needed it because they were the traditional belts, but how you completely realigned the belt so it was completely vertical. You have 4 places of attachment. That's what we never had, and makes complete sense and a game changer, and still using that thick belt to now really get that decompressive load.
Okay, it's Larry Miller again. I want to talk a little about eccentric overload. This is something that's been proven in the research for better muscle hypertrophy, for strengthening tendons and ligaments better than anything else, but it's very difficult to do. Not so with bands and not so with the motor. So what I'll do, and this machine, this prototype, is not ideal for what I'll do, but it'll give you a good feel for what it's all about. So let's say I've got a fish scale here. Let's say my max is about 150 pounds in a squat. So I'm at about 150 pounds there. All right, so I'm getting traction while I do this, by the way. Now, let's say I want to do eccentric overload. So now I'm going to raise it to just over 200, okay? But as I come down, and I'm going to come down slowly because it's resisting and it's heavier than what I can normally do, what I can do is like a walk back. So as I'm coming down slowly and the tension's lessening, I can keep the tension really high until I'm sitting down. Then I deload the band, come back up, go to my whatever 260. Again, I'm going to come down low slowly, but again, what I can do is keep the band activated, so it's staying heavy through the entire movement. So I think for professional athletes, especially football players, anybody prone to knee injuries, this is an awesome way to avoid that.
Really good explanation. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that. As you know, we got a couple more videos coming afterwards as well. But before I move on, anything?
No, I think that's, again, I think that's the only true eccentric overload that I've ever seen. And again, it's because the combination of the bands and the motor. So
I'll just play this one right away.
sure.
Hi, my name is Dr. Larry Miller. I'm here today to talk to you about a prototype machine called the Bantrax that I developed as an offshoot of a belt squat machine, which I have another one in another room. The guy who invented this had fixed thousands of backs over the years based on the traction forces he created with the belt around your waist pulling down. I use only rubber bands instead of weights, and I use a motor to stretch the bands. So this is what it looks like. My traction forces could be from 1 pound on this particular motor to 1,100 pounds. The key is movement. Back pain has been shown not to be receptive for back traction devices such as the inversion tables or decompression tables. The things that show promise are the VertiTrack made out of Israel, which combines movement and traction, and there's one out of Japan called the ProTech FMT. Again, same thing, movement and traction. And aquatic therapy has also been successful. Why? Because it involves movement. It's just like early mobilization techniques. So the key is movement. You can see how easy it is to do on this machine. VertiTrack says they do three-dimensional back traction. I think I can do the same thing while I'm tractioning upward and downward. I can also traction forward and backward. So I've got two different tractions going on at the same time. I'm working with Cleveland State's Physical Therapy and Exercise Science Department. I've also got what I think is a good cure for for non-specific lower back pain. I have a lacrosse ball and a belt here. I've had problems for like 20 years, which were resolved in one day. By positioning the lacrosse ball around the tight muscle in my back, bending over, so I've got like a 90-degree bend, so the vertical traction is pushing down with whatever forces I deem necessary on that specific muscle. So you don't have to dig in deep. You can just use a contraption like I have.
So this is what I saw like
Right.
20 years ago being done with a traditional belt squat. And when I tried to recreate it, it was just like, gosh, I wish I had a little, you were trying to find that leverage, number one, of finding that perfect decompression, that sweet spot. I mean, as a ninja chiropractor, just like a ninja lifter, you're looking, the millimeters matter, and how you recruit, how you do everything. So when I saw that, it was just like a wow that went on in my head, and I could just visualize, okay, like what's the vertebrae doing? What's the cerebral spinal fluid doing? What's the bathing of the joints, the decompression of the disc? Then you start putting in the neurology, the cross crawl. You're not completely cross crawling. You're not swinging your arms, but the neural inhibition of what you're doing with walking, muscles turned on, muscles turned off, that reciprocal inhibition that you're doing there. And it was just like, wow, that is freaking amazing. And I had never seen that before. Trying to recreate it, again, we kind of saw the variables that were difficult with the traditional belt squat. That wasn't what it was used for. So this is what Marty and I had talked about for so long, never making a real concerted effort with how busy we are doing other things. So again, when we saw yours, and it was like, oh, so that's how you would have done it. And it is absolutely how you've incorporated the motor, the rubber bands, the uniqueness of the belt. The difference is that magic millimeters that we're looking for, even though you're adding some unlimited significant ranges for people, whether you're 6'8", whether you're 80 years old, whether you're 10 years old, completely safe, and every variable in between.
Yep.
When I squat now, I've got about 200 pounds at the top. I've got about 50 pounds at the bottom, but I move very quickly. And that's how I do my power squats now.
Now, this again is probably not going to be what doctors or people are going to be doing, the first time that they do it. But walk us through this whole concept of what you're doing here.
Well, I think my squat form was bad to start with. Actually, I did two different types of squatting on this. I did for the quadriceps, so my knees went out a little bit over my toes on that one. And then I would do more of a sit back style for the glutes. So I worked both glutes differently than I did my quadriceps. But again, it's generating power, which again, you have the handles there to hold on to. So it makes it a lot safer. You have low resistance out of the bottom. So you get the momentum, you get the power, the speed. You can end up with a heavier load than what you're normally capable of doing because, again, with power, you generate that speed. So so I think, again, this is extremely good. We'll be able to do similar with jumping with the next model. So you won't need nearly that band tension, but again, you'll be jumping with band tension with that belt around your waist. So that I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out. again, Louis had said that his machine was the best for vertical jump, but he didn't have rubber bands back then. And again, we've already talked about the value of the variable resistance of the bands.
Obviously, the handles are there for balance and stability, whether you're lifting maximum weights or from a clinical frailty standpoint of how you're working with them. But do you coach people on that too, as you're holding on there and you're decompressing the spine, that you can also use that perfect amount of arm drive to decompress the spine to kind of find that real comfortable, to where it's almost like two ice cubes or floating together, kind of amplifying that with a little bit of hand traction there, and then especially doing the walking in place or even just standing there, as people may have been able to see when you're increasing band tension, and if people were paying attention, where the cable does attach to the belt, how just standing there it starts pulling in, and when you're in the machine you really feel that low back traction even without putting movement to it at that time.
Well, one of the people I got a hold of, well, I read his book. He's very well known in chiropractic circles, is Dr. Stuart McGill. And he had in one of his books a picture of somebody, they have those exercise stations at parks, and he showed somebody more like doing a dip, but not doing a dip, just holding himself straight up and letting his back decompress. And so from that, and I had talked to him about it, he actually has a belt squat machine. uh, but so I decided we had to have handles that we could put at different positions. So again, like you stated, if the belt's pulling down on the lumbar area, wouldn't you want your upper body to be pushing upward? You'll create more separation there. So yes, the purpose of the hand, and we're revising the handles quite a bit. They're way too long. So we're going to shorten them up quite a bit, give a little bit more movement for people within that framework. But yeah, so you want to be pushing up while the belt's pulling you down. Absolutely.
Yeah, this feels so good, and you've done such a great job with this model, and I can't even wait to see the next one that you're coming out with, the next prototype, which will be really close to the final product. You're close to the finish line to have other people contact you and sell this. So before, I'll play the video first. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of things you can do. This is more of the traditional belt squat, but the athleticism that you're able to do at a belt squat, it's not just for symmetrical strength, powerlifting, etc. Go ahead, Dr. Larry, walk us through. I mean, this is just one example of many three-dimensional things you can do, but you're going to be able to do all these athletic movements on yours as well.
Right. All the newer belt squats are much smaller. You can't do this. Louis was a genius, and that's him to the right. The person on the machine is a tennis friend. He's a professional tennis player. And he wanted to come down. He came down with his strength and conditioning coach from Cleveland State to meet Louis and see what he was doing. I think he put my friend Nico on 3 different exercises, but all sports is hip rotation. Whether you're kicking a soccer ball, whether you're throwing a baseball, whether you're hitting a tennis ball. So you see Nico with the rubber band in his hand mimicking a forehand. And he had him in another video mimicking a serve with the rubber band. So he's combining 2 different things at one time, cardio and resistance training. I can't say what it is now, but I've got a special acronym for that. I've got a certain name for it. So you can do, like on my machine, you'll be able to do rowing um, at this. So you'll be able to do your legs up and down. You'll be able to squat using your legs like you might in a rowing machine. And then you can have the bands in your arms and you can turn around. So instead of pulling, you're pushing the bands out. There's a push-pull exercise. You can do step-ups on these. So this is actually can be an aerobic machine. But when you've got that belt around your waist and there, you don't see any bands or weights around it, because I think his carriage was like 40 pounds. So as soon as you put it on, you got like 40 pounds on it, something like that. So you see people a lot for hips. They do medicine ball tosses, etc. Well, imagine doing a medicine ball toss with that belt pulling down on your hips with 40 degrees or 50 or 40 pounds or 50 pounds or 60 pounds. That really fires up those hip flexors. So I think we're going to work with Cleveland State's golfing team, we hope, to see if we can improve their driving distance. But again, hip strength is so important. It's so hard to get. Um, and with this machine, it's just something that can be done routinely.
And it's so real world transfer. So
Yes.
I mean, here again, picture if you're a quarterback and all the foot moving drills they do constantly, look left, look right, feet, 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 but you need that strong base and then just snap. This is going to be incredible for that. It just goes on and on. I mean, it's pretty much endless, the benefits to it, to where all power comes from the pelvis. But yet, when you even look at the incorporation of the big toe and foot dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, it then just that grind just pulling you down, that's not going to exist once you're on the field. The conditioning aspect of this to help people who throw, no matter if it's track and field throwing, or again, we're talking quarterbacks as one example, fighters, shadow boxing, just a wide variety of exercises they already do on that. Just that constant dynamic under tension while you can do freedom of movement, three-dimensional. If you've never been on it, it is an eye-opener, and it's the shortest report of findings you'll ever need to give to somebody because of what you feel and all the different dynamics to it.
Hopefully people understand why I now say it's the best machine ever invented. You can
Yeah,
see the value for sports performance.
and if they don't already, it's going to be available here relatively soon. There's no substitute for feeling it hands-on. I know we want to, where applicable in the seminars that we do, it definitely, we're going to be promoting this on our website to our audience that we have, whether it's the consumers, whether the professionals. We absolutely believe in this strongly. A lot of people out there, in the laser world, we're always looking for how can we add more dynamics to the laser. And for those of you that even know what that means, it's going to be really obvious to you as far as how you could put lasers in the stands, whether you're using the handhelds or the FX. And, lasering people while they do this, and you get that cellular communication, that mitochondrial energy, increasing that metabolism while you are activating. The only thing that's better than laser therapy is just one modality example is laser with activation. And this allows us darn close to infinite applications to amplify the great work that each do by themselves. So Larry, if you're ready to close, why don't you just walk us through how people can contact you, stay in touch? Obviously, there's some new things still coming with you.
Okay, well, that's the one thing I that we probably should kind of go back about is bench press techniques, since we
Okay, yeah,
got sidetracked, and
right.
I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, well, how am I going to learn about the bench press? I mean, this is my contact information. Feel free there. Let me just real quickly go through the bench press, some of the things that I've learned over the years, some of the things to talk about, and if that's okay with you,
Oh,
Jerome.
absolutely. You know what? So let me close out of this.
Okay, so pool noodle. So this is what I learned from the Japanese coach. So, and I'm not as flexible as I used to be. So what they would do is put the pool noodle underneath them. And now, so that helps kind of set you up for your arch. Now, I was actually able to keep my butt on the bench. So what they would do is if your butt's on the bench, they would make this wider. So their goal was to put this underneath you so that your butt wasn't on the bench. As your back acclimated to that position, eventually you would loosen it up to the point where you would be touching. Okay. Then they would go ahead and make it wider. So they were kept trying to increase that arch. Okay. Again, that's what I was referring to. I don't know how you feel about that,
Oh, no,
but
I think it's great. You want strength through range of motion. You just have to condition it properly. I'm a huge fan. I can't do back bends, but it was just because, I do other things now, but I think every kid should be able to do back bends, train it intelligently, ballet, gymnastics, whatever, but just tumbling. I am all for whatever other clinicians would say, don't care. proper training, get that flexible back, strength through flexibility to where you can do back bends and even load it up. It's completely safe. There's no contraindications. If you think there's contraindications, you just have no clue and experience with training it the right way.
All right. As far as grip, there's an 81 centimeter mark on these. The rule is it's got to be covered. So I went ahead and the first international competition I was at, first thing I noticed, because women always lift first, is the 98-pound Japanese women would be as wide as possible. Why? Again, we talked about the shorter the distance. I don't think that the people who have close grip benches are maximizing things. There are some really good guys that bench pretty well with their hands in closer, but from a logical standpoint, you want to go as wide as possible. So you've got to have that knurl covered. Okay. The lift off. Always people will say on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. No, you don't want to be talking while you're getting a lift off. What I would do is say third deep breath. So I go, then I get the lift off. So they knew after my third breath to lift the bar out for me. Okay. I would breathe through the mouth first to load my stomach, elevate it, and then through the nose, then to get my chest involved a little bit. So I always wanted to be as tight in the chest and abs as possible. You don't want to be talking, while again you're getting the lift off, because then you can't take that breath. You can't be tight. It's all about being tight. The only thing that moves are your arms. Okay. If you have trouble keeping your butt on the bench for competition and they're in front, move them out to the side a little bit, farther in front, etc. We talked, you can get an average tennis shoe nowadays. Some will work well with carpets, some not. So you just have to go through trial and error with that. As far as sets and reps go, and this a lot of different studies. I'm not sure I buy into all these studies all the time. There's so many variables. I used to do my warm-ups, and then when I went to the bench, I do 3 sets of 8s. I think is a good strength program, doing 8s. Since I was warmed up, I would do my heaviest 8 first. So my best I got to was 385 for 8 reps. So if I did 385 for 8 reps, I knew I was going to be a little bit exhausted. Muscles had been worked pretty good. So then I would maybe drop to 375. If I got 8 reps there, great. And then maybe my third set was 365. If I got 8 reps there, great. If I got 8 reps, then I moved the weight up. If I got 8 reps on my first, but only 7 on the next 2, then I left my second 2 alone and just added weight for the next session to the first set. Okay. I don't believe in doing a set number. If I could do 10 instead of 8, I did 10. Don't cut yourself short. Again, there's studies showing when you overload your muscles, there are good results. Some people say, no, if you go max, you're not going to get good results, etc. So I'm believing going to failure. So if you see my old benches in training with the guys, I always forced out my last 1 or 2. I went pretty much to failure on everything. And again, you might have to take a little bit more time off for that, but I'm a believer in recruiting as many muscle fibers as possible. So again, have somebody lift off for you on a third breath, have your feet planted, and hold your breath down. You want to stay tight. If you want to exhale on the way up, that's fine, but you want your body tight on the way down. Okay, you don't want anything loose. You don't do that for any of the lifts. And we talked a little bit earlier too. Exercises, the decline bench press, I think was number 1. I used to do heavy dips with what I did. I think 2 1/4 around my waist for like 8 reps. So your bench is triceps from start to finish. Your chest kicks in here, but you lose it here. Your lats here. So what's going to get you through the end of the lift is your triceps. You have to work the triceps. I work mine hard 3 days a week. Close grip benches, I didn't go in really close. If this was my normal 81 centimeter grip, then I was here for my close grips. Why? Because I wanted to handle a heavy weight. It wasn't just about getting, muscle burn there. I still wanted to do heavy weights. If you're going to be a big bencher, you got to have the heavy weights. So triceps, we would do close grip. We do tricep pull downs. We talked about the rubber bands before. And I told you that I have a lot of rubber bands attached to everything. So, let me move this down a little bit. Sorry for the glare. So you can attach it here. You can move quickly and safely with tricep push downs. So let me just make sure I got everything. So that's reps position. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think that also doing lat pull downs is important because that's incorporated at the bottom. So just want to make sure I got the bench press stuff in there. Maybe we should move that to the front of the podcast. I don't know, but those are the keys. I think going to failure quite a bit and making sure you don't overtrain.
Excellent. Dr. Larry, I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. Congratulations on still those historic lifts that are still standing out there and recognized even in modern day here. Pound for pound, unbelievable. Even a better person than your physical accomplishments. But all of the above. I know we're going to have you on again. We're going to keep the audience in tune as you and I talk regularly. And, when this next machine comes out, it's going to be really exciting, too, to have some of the other coaches that you work with directly over there, as we talk about Bobby Khalil and what he's doing with athletes on a very, very large scale there at Spires Academy. Incredible topic there. We're definitely going to have him on at some point, and probably you two together, as you guys are very synergistic and work a lot with a lot of unique things besides what we talked about today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening, hopefully.
Yeah, so any closing remarks to people as we're winding up?
No, just I think one of my sayings is train smarter. So, have an open mind, see if it makes sense. And if it makes sense, then try and incorporate it in to your program.
All right. Well, thanks, Dr. Larry. Great podcast here. Everybody who wants to contact him, we're going to put the slide up on the end with his email. Again, so you could even go to his website, kind of stay updated through those things. And everybody's going to be anxiously awaiting the final Backtracks machine so they can help themselves and help others. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jerome.